Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are delighted to be here tonight celebrating Dr. Cynthia B. Dillard's work, the spirit of our work, Black Women Teachers Remember. We are joined by the Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American culture and history. Morris Gardner is here with us tonight in the chat, dropping additional resources. So you'll notice throughout the evening that you may get some links to other things at the library and online. We'd love for you to check those out. They will stay up in perpetuity. So don't rush, don't worry, they will be there. You can revisit them anytime at the same URL that you registered. And let me first introduce our conversation partner, who is well known in the Charis fam and Charis community, Dr. Bettina Love. Dr. Bettina Love is an award-winning author and the Athletic Association Endowed Professor at the University of Georgia. Her writing, research, teaching, and educational advocacy work meet at the intersection of education reform, anti-racism, carceral studies, abolition, and Black joy. The aim of her scholarship is twofold. Firstly, to advance how the field of education understands and critiques the system and structural racism of public education within the United States. And secondly, to advocate for abolitionist approaches in the field of education that seek new possibilities for educational justice. In the pursuit of making her scholarship a reality, she works with activists, communities, youth, families, and school districts to build communal, civically engaged schools rooted in the aspirations of abolitionist strategies that love and affirm Black and Brown children. In 2020, Dr. Love co-founded the Abolitionist Teaching Network, ATN. ATN's mission is simple: develop and support teachers and parents to fight injustice within their schools and communities. In 2020, Dr. Love was also named a member of the Old Fourth Ward Economic Security Task Force with the Atlanta City Council. The goal of the task force is to advance dialogue and form tangible solutions for guaranteed income. So we are delighted to have you here, Dr. Love. And the person of the hour this evening is Dr. Cynthia B. Dillard, Nana Mansa II of Mpisam, Ghana, West Africa. She is the Mary Frances Early Professor of Teacher Education in the Department of Educational Theory and Practice at the University of Georgia. Her research interests include critical teacher education, spirituality in education, and African-American feminist studies. Aside from being a prolific scholar, teacher, and sought-after speaker, Dr. Dillard was recently appointed Dean of the College of Education at Seattle University, beginning February of 2022. The spirit of our work, Black Women Teachers Remember, is the book we are celebrating together tonight. So in the spirit of that celebration, I want to encourage folks to ask questions. You may do that by clicking the Ask a Question button at the bottom center of your screen or bottom right at any time. If you're on your phone and that's what you can put it. Bettina, I think you maybe have an extra tab open. So if you can close extra tabs, I think that's what that echo is about. If folks have questions, just put them in the Ask a Question box. And if you're on your phone and having trouble, just put them in the chat and I'll move them over so that they are accessible. All right. Thank y'all both so much for being here. It is a true honor. This is the first event anywhere worldwide for this book. So Charis is very, very proud to be helping kick it off. So I'm going to get out of the way and welcome our conversation partners tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ER. We are just delighted that you are hosting this amazing event, and more delighted. This is the first event of many for this amazing work. Before we get talking about this book, let me just say to all of my beautiful family that is in the chat right now, at home with the popcorn, with the wine, all of our sisters out here in the chat, we see you, we love you. Thank you so much for being here to not only to celebrate this book, but to celebrate the work of Dr. Cynthia Dillard. This is an amazing book, Dr. Dillard. And I am honored that I get the opportunity to be the first person that you have this conversation with. It is truly just a moment I will always embrace, always honor, and always cherish. So, hello, Dr. Dillard.
Hello, Dr. Bettina Love. How are you? Oh, and thanks so much for that beautiful intro too. I mean, to ER and Charis, but to you, I mean, it doesn't feel like this is the first conversation because it's not.
No,
We've been having conversations about this book for years, it feels like. So the fact that it's launching its way out into the world is the excitement for me. And I'm so very, very grateful. Just so very grateful for you, but also just so very grateful to have the ability to be able to write this story about us.
Yes.
So,
yes.
yeah.
Well, let's get into this amazing book.
Okay.
Let's get into it.
Okay.
So, you know, there are so many conversations that we can talk about in this book and how we can frame the book. But I think the one thing I really want to talk about is first Ghana. Like so much, we can't talk about this book without talking about Ghana. So just walk us through 1995, you entering this space and what Ghana becomes, what it means to you. How do you make meaning of this space? And then how do you think about this idea? And I'm going to get into it because the definition of spirituality that you give, I said, finally, somebody gave us the definition of spirituality we've been waiting on. But I'm going to slow down. Talk us through what Ghana, the trajectory of 30 years of going back and forth on this side of the water and that side of the water and living there and being there. What is, just talk us through Ghana.
Sure. And one of the impetus of Ghana really is very basic. I have a love of cloth, traditional cloth. And I didn't really know much about it. I just knew that when I saw African women generally wearing cloth from their own countries in Ghana and in Nigeria and in South Africa and everywhere else, there was something about that just drew me into that cloth. And so my very first trip to Ghana was really about cloth. It was about actually going and learning about the cloth traditions of the country. So learning about kente cloth, learning about batik, learning about ashoke cloth, learning about adinkra cloth, learning about how culture and traditions are wrapped up in cloth. So that was really what sort of sent me there in 1995. So I went on a tour with a bunch of educators from New York. I sort of was an interloper. I just, jumped on the bus and went with everybody else on their tour. And they were taking a group of young people to Ghana to look at, it was supposed to have been some sort of, what do you call those things? Rites of passage kind of an event for these young people, right? It wasn't that. It ended up being a whole awful experience for those poor young people. But for those of us who were grown and those of us who were teachers who were interloping on this experience, we actually had a great time with those youth. We actually had a great time talking with them about what it meant to be in those dungeons. Great time talking with them about what it meant to be on the ground in Africa when their own chaperones and their own faculty were not doing so. So a whole nother story. But basically it was just that first time. And I got there and I don't know if you fall in love at first sight. I don't know about those things really, but that's how it felt to me. Like I felt like this place was known to me, even as I knew it was not known to me. And I left Ghana in love with the place, but also recognizing that happens often in my own travels, that I'll get to a place and I'll just feel good there. Part of it is just you're relaxing and you're relating. Part of it is that you're seeing something new and it's influencing you. But there was something different about Ghana. It felt like it got under my skin in a way that other places in the world never had. So I came back and I thought, I loved being there. Let me go back to Ghana and see if it was that kind of infatuation with a new place or whether it was really something more deep and substantive than that. So I went back it wasn't 8 months later, I went back to Ghana by myself this time. And again, that same experience of stepping off that plane, the soil, the smells, the people, the cloth, the food, the spirit of the place. I can name it now. The spirit of the place just takes you in. I mean, it's like a gigantic hug, and it's like that all the time. And our people are so damn beautiful when we are grounded in spaces that we know and that are ours. And at that moment, I knew that I was beginning a long relationship with Ghana.
Wow.
I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I had to be in that place. The other thing I also knew is that I had to do something useful in that place. To go to Ghana and to be that same sort of exploitive force that had been the nature of the Western world was not for me. I needed to work. I needed to be useful in Ghana. So it took me a while to figure out that part. But again, and I've told the story in other books, but I was taken to this very small village in Ghana called Mimpiasem that ER mentioned earlier. And all I saw were kids and beautiful families, but no place to go to school. And so that was the beginning of recognizing that if I really believed that Black folks deserved education, deserved spaces where they could learn and grow, that had to be a commitment that was not just about my own little neighborhood, but about the world. So I came back, grabbed some money, went back, built a school. And we opened that school in 2001, and it was supposed to only be a nursery school, but kids grew up and they kept growing. And we kept trying to push them into this space, but they just kept growing up. And eventually we had to shut down the kindergarten, first, second grade, and send those kids off to another school if they went to school at all. Around that time, I met my husband, who's also from Ghana. And those of you out in the crowd who know Uncle Henry, as you affectionately call him, I looked at him one day and I just said, can we build a real school? And he said, Cynth, we can do it. And that was the beginning of our school now. So we actually have built and run pre-K through grade 7 now. So junior high school, school with about 200 of the most amazing youth on the planet in that school. And so he and I do that from here and from there. And I recognized quickly that my own students from Georgia, from the University of Georgia, would really benefit from the ability of seeing Black kids in Black spaces doing Black folks things in a way that was rooted in the root of African American people. So I started taking my students in a study abroad across the waters, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, a little bit later. But ended up that students went, but faculty wanted to go too. And and so that's what actually happened. We actually just started all traveling to Ghana in a critical, studied way to look at the basis of African American education, starting at the root and not at the enslavement of African people on this side of the waters. So that's kind of the genesis of this work. And then I began to watch what would happen to other people. And it was the same kind of falling in love that happened to me in 1994. And I said, something very powerful is happening here. And I want to know what that is. And so we began to study the groups of people that we were taking from the United States to Ghana and the ways that experience on the continent at its root, at the root of Black folks, how that experience shifted the air in the room. I mean, it literally shifts the DNA in your body. And so I wanted to try to describe that. And that's really the essence of this book. What happens when Black women in particular have the opportunity to understand the root of their existence and their being? Everything changes. Everything changes. And you're a testament to that. A lot of folks are a testament to that. Everything changes. So that's sort of my long version of how I got to to this place. But it feels like it's always been with me, Tina. Honestly, Ghana has always been in my spirit. I just didn't start going there until 1994.
But I think, Dr. Dillard, what so many things. I don't have another screen now. I mean, your work is so inspiring to so many people, and it has to do so much with Ghana and this idea of the roots of where we come from, and not starting with enslavement, not starting with here, but starting there. But also the ways in which you have thought about the idea of spirit and spirituality and education. And many Black women and Black people, we've always felt that. And we knew that, but you named it. And you were someone who you marshaled in that we're going to put spirit and spirituality, we're going to put it in there. We're going to put it in teacher education. It's like, hold on, you can do that? You can do that, Dr. Dillard? And you say on page 81, which I just love, that, spirituality brings together 3 interlocking dimensions from which we interact and engage with: our social and political awareness, our spiritual connectedness and consciousness that may bring together religion traditions, as well as traditional ancestral practices, and enhance our creativity and ability to imagine.
Yeah, that is us. You see, I think the narrative that has followed Black people on this side of the water is one of brokenness, of need, of limits, of degradation, of oppression, we could go on. But it's not an empowering narrative. It's not an empowering story. And the story of us and our triumph in those systems is not even the story that we can tell yet, as fully as we need to. For me, if we can understand who we are, like for real, like understand who we really are. That for me helps us see the spirit of Black folks, because we are the same people. We're the same people. And if we can get to the place where we recognize that those are our brothers and sisters, cousins, aunties, uncles. And the way, without a lot of economic privilege, people move in the world in such powerful ways on the continent, in ways that, as my mother says, they don't walk, they glide, because they've never been displaced. They've never had another narrative told about them. And so that's the spirit of Black people is within us. That spirit is something that we should never apologize for. It is something that animates the very nature of our work, that political consciousness, that creativity, that those religious upbringings, possibly those imaginations. And we see it in kids, we see it in Black children. But something about the process of schooling moves it away from us, moves that creativity away from us, pushes down that political consciousness. But I am so sort of enamored by this generation of young people, though, because they seem to be that I'm not going to be moved kind of folks, and in a way that my generation, for example, was not. And I'm excited about that, because that spirit, if we ever figure out what we are and what's animating the work that we do, there's nothing we can't do. And if you've ever stood, as we talk about in the book, if you ever stood on those slave dungeon floors, you will recognize there's nothing that you can't do. There's just nothing you can't do.
I mean, I went to Ghana with you in 2018, and it was one of those transformational experiences. I've never felt that free before in my life. I remember we were going to make the ink to make the kente cloth. And I remember walking to this village, and we turned another corner, and we turned another corner, and turned another corner, and there was a goat, and then there was a man, and then I realized I was lost. I said, oh, I'm lost. I don't know where I am. And that that anxiety that from being here in the US and being lost and being Black and being a woman and being queer, all of that anxiety came up. And then I realized I'm home.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't got a reason to be scared. And it was a feeling that I had never felt before, lost.
Mm-hmm.
I had no clue where I was. And I can remember wanting that feeling, like a high almost, wanting that feeling again.
Yeah.
Wanting to just be free and to be lost and to not care if I'm lost, to be lost and feel safe.
Yeah, that's the difference, is that it's one thing to be lost. Another thing to know that no one's going to harm you while you're lost, that someone is going to look out for you or somebody's going to help you find your way back home. That's a different feeling than I'm lost and I best not get caught out here in these streets. So
Right.
this idea of being lost, that is the beauty of it, right? And if we think about learning, being lost is the space where you can actually learn, where you actually come out on the other side like, oh, that's what that was, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in Ghana, I feel that way about Ghana everywhere. Like, and there's beautiful examples of this. I remember when I first went to Ghana and I had to take a taxi. And I remember going to the taxi stand. I wasn't quite sure, and I didn't have as much facility with the language that I do now. And I remember going to the taxi stand and standing there trying to figure out which taxi I was supposed to be taking if I wanted to get back to Cape Coast. And finally someone came up and they asked me, it's like, where are you going? And I said, I wanted to go to Cape Coast or to Abra. And he said, oh, it's this taxi over here. And I got in the taxi and we started traveling. And my husband, Uncle Henry, was looking for me. And he knew I had gone to the taxi stand. So he went to the taxi stand. He said, have you seen this woman? She kind of looks, oh, yes, we know her. She went in the taxi with so-and-so, and they went to this place. And then they went over here. And then so there were like 100 people who had seen me, knew where I was, knew which taxi I was in, knew who the person was who was driving the taxi. So this idea of what a community is, like everybody's looking out for everybody. Nobody is going to be harmed because this is the community's job to keep you safe, to care for you, to put you in good hands. So yeah, it's I search like, yeah.
It's a model for what we're talking about right here in the U.S. We're talking about safety. We're talking about feeling safe. We're talking about abolition and just reducing of harm. And here's our model.
Yeah, exactly.
It's such a beautiful space. And
it's Black. I think that's the piece that is really important. It's not just a model, it's Black. And one of the things that I hope folks will gather from this book is, yes, it's a book about Black women, because I think voices of Black women need to be put forward and put center, especially for teachers. But I also want to say that if you can figure out what to do that's right for Black women in all of our variety, you will figure out what to do about everybody. That part.
Say that one more time, Dr. Dillard. Say that one more time.
No, but it's really true. If we can figure out what to do that's good for Black women of all stripes, we will figure out what's good for everybody.
Okay, so let me do my job.
Okay. Your job.
This is the point where you are going to read to us.
Oh, yes, I'm going to read.
Now, I will tell everybody at home to just sit back and relax.
Yes.
Listen to Dr. Dillard's voice, listen to her words, as we are going to just, you got to get it. When does this come out, Dr. Dillard? Give us the official
November
date.
16th is when it actually comes out.
November 16th. So until then, what you're about to hear, just hold on to the goodness. Just hold on.
And then click that link down below. I think there's a link down there where you can buy.
A link down below. So you can get your pre-order on right now. Get your pre-order on.
That's right.
So go ahead so we can have a little story time.
Okay, so I've sort of timed, it's probably around 10 minutes or so, and I'll just read. I probably won't look at you a bunch. But I hope that if you're within the sound of my voice, that, as Tina said, that you'll just sort of take it in, let the words wash over you. You can visualize Ghana if you want, or whatever makes you feel happy. But the chapter is entitled, and I'll read just a portion of it. The chapter is chapter 1. It's entitled, My Spirit Remembers Me Whole. The importance of Black women's knowing, memory, and spirituality. And I start with a quote from the incredible author Ayi Kwe Arma from Ghana in his book, 2000 Seasons. He says this: "We are not a people of yesterday. Do they ask how many single seasons we have flowed from our beginnings till now? We shall point them to the proper beginnings of their counting. The air everywhere is poisoned with the truncated tales of our origins. That is also a part of the wreckage of our people. What has been cast abroad is not a thousandth of our history, even if the quality were true. But the haze of this foul and existent world exists to wipe away our knowledge of our way." If we are to talk about spirit and spirituality, what is important to know first and foremost about people we call African Americans is this: we are Black on purpose for a purpose. Whether conscious of or willing to name our existence, we are Africans first, Black people. Regardless of the names we call ourselves, our existence in the diaspora has been seducing us to forget the memories of our ways, as Ayi Kwe Arma said, poisoned with the truncated tales of our origins. Despite these powerful acts of seduction, many of us have answered a call that honors a profoundly different truth, a call to be like Harriet Tubman's light in dark places, a truth that is about the right to be free, a truth that embraces the need to push and resist, a call that requires us to agitate and move towards remembering our way and the freedom that brings. We are Black on purpose for a purpose. Too often in the study of teaching and teacher education, we approach discussions and research about race, gender, and education from a place of presuming Black people just happened to be here in the Americas, just happened to be enslaved, just happened to have suffered more than 400 years of degradation and inequities. We speak and act as if these traumatic conditions occurred to an entire race of people and continue to occur without regard to the consequences and effects that such a legacy has on a people, particularly in relation to teaching, learning, and education. By extension, such narratives imply that it was simply an unfortunate set of circumstances that just happened in the United States of America, instead of a systematic structuring of privileges for some and marginalization for others, conditions that have created the permanence of racism, racial injustice, and racial inequities. We need only look at the recent uprisings in the streets last year across the world to be reminded of Black people's continued and persistent resistance and revolution in the face of oppression. The insistence on our humanity, though, is in our DNA. The impacts of racism and racial inequities on Black women continue to be an invisible part of this legacy of oppression, especially in the literature on Black teachers' lives and experiences. This is an invisibility that must be addressed. In my view, there is a different way to think about the presence and work of Black women teachers. We can center that conversation about education on the spirit of Black women teachers who have thrived and loved in spite of our unmentionable and multiple oppressions. Black women have always marshaled and remembered the legacy of Black people in relation to our spirits. And those rememberings have required us to lean on the substance of things unseen, on our spirituality. Current conversations about racial and intersectional identities are largely silent about the role of spirituality, spiritual health, and well-being in the lives of Black teachers, who are often by default also those teachers called both to teach and to provide safe havens from the often detrimental impacts of race, gender, and inequities in education for Black and Brown students. This is made even more insulting because this labor of protecting our children in schools comes in addition to teaching our subject matter or the topics on our syllabi. This is part of the invisible labor and burden that Black women teachers bear every day. This invisibility is at least partially a result of the separation of church and state that undergirds education in the US. But what scholarship has implicitly told us, and what I have worked over the course of a career to lift up, is that in order to face adversity, oppression, and exclusion, and remain steadfast in one's right to exist and to be, it is often the spiritual life that has supported and affirmed and continues to support and affirm culturally relevant and sustaining practices in educational spaces with Black students and their teachers. Throughout this book, I speak of spirituality or a spiritual life in a way that is nuanced by the lived experiences of Black women. Spirituality here is defined as a consciousness of and attention to the order, power, and unity that flows through all of life and that encompasses an energy and responsibility greater than ourselves. But for Black women, spirituality has three additional dimensions that Tina talked about earlier, and Akasha Hull describes as a new spirituality of Black women, with each dimension impacting the others and all of them together generating tremendous power. These dimensions of our spirituality include: one, our politics; secondly, our spiritual consciousness; and thirdly, our creativity. Thus, engaging one's spirituality is also about using it to address, break down, and work to abolish structures and conditions that hamper liberation and freedom for Black people. Such labor requires great creative force and energy, but I believe it also requires Black women teachers to remember who we are, our history, our culture, our contributions, in ways that take into account the long history of Black life, resistance, knowledge, and culture. Our work as Black women teachers has been and continues to be about attending to the spirit of those whom we teach, and at the same time about talking back, as Bell Hooks says, resisting and creating the education we wished that we had had for ourselves. But undergirding this labor, and often in hostile climates, we must also remember who we are and whose we are in order to create more humane conditions in school and university communities. What is important to know for Black women teachers at all levels, from K through 12 through higher education, is this: when Black women are able and willing to marshal their spirits in pursuit of teaching and learning, everything we touch can be transformed, including our students. Despite all that we have been through, Black women have continued to sing our songs and tell our tales as loudly as we are able. But the hunter has always told the story in ways that glorify his conquests, labor, and accomplishment. It is now time for Black women to remember and tell our stories in ways that lift up the politics, spiritual consciousness, and creativity that we hold dear and that fuels us. And those stories travel full circle from the continent of Africa through the diaspora and back again. We have an obligation to make our teaching and living about remembering the full circle of all of our stories. So like the voice of Nana Pasant in Daughters of the Dust, like the wise stories many of us heard as children at the feet of our ancestors in our version of a village, like those heard from older kids on our block or at the knees of our mothers as they braided our hair, I begin to tell this collective story of how remembering is a central part of the spirit of Black women who teach. My first step in telling the story was to gather texts that have been transformative and life-changing for me as a Black woman teacher and scholar. I reviewed them before I wrote a single word of this book. This act was an homage to my ancestors, a literal gathering of their wisdom into the space to support the sense-making that was required from pages of copious notes, interview transcripts, and handwritten journal entries. This process was the precursor to laying hands on the computer keyboard. As I mentioned, one of the first pieces I picked up was that stunning book by Ghanaian author Ayi Kwe-Armah, published in 2000 and entitled 2000 Seasons. As I reviewed it, I realized yet again that acts of remembering are the cultural guidance we need from the ancestors, an inheritance for Black folks that has already been bought and paid for. We need only put on our crowns. Knowing who we are and whose we are, knowing that we are enough and walking in that truth is already deeply embedded inside of us, in our memories as Black people. Even in the problematic realities of the American experience, Black people embody a spiritual knowing, a just knowing, a way of being in relationship with the full circle of life. And who we are is grounded in an energy that is greater than our individual selves alone. Black people, and especially Black women, are the humanizing energy that can lift all boats. We have spent too many centuries forgetting our knowings and our ways of being, and it has been long enough. My hope is that in this reading, you too might be moved to remember, to call your own life back to yourself on behalf of the demands of this day, on behalf of Black education, on behalf of the liberation and freedom of Black people everywhere. And to do so, we have to learn to remember the things we have learned to forget. I think I'll stop there.
It's just beautiful, Dr. Dillard. It's just absolutely beautiful. The way you talk about Black people, the way you talk about Black women, the way you talk about Ghana, the way you put the pieces together for us. And, you know, when I first, there was a few things when I first read that I had to sit with. We are Black on purpose for a purpose. Mm-hmm. We are Black for a purpose. This is not happenstance. Mm-hmm. This isn't like just talk us through that. Because if you are an educator and you realize that those babies are Black on purpose, then that's a whole different framing of how you understand what your job is.
Mm-hmm. So I think when I was younger, especially when I was a young student, junior high school, middle school, junior high school, and all the things were coming at you. I grew up in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and all of the things were coming at you. There was, on the one hand, people all around me saying that Black was beautiful, and I wanted Angela Davis's afro, and I did my best to get it, and the hoop earrings my mother wouldn't allow me to have, and just all of those things. I had that on the one hand, and then I had a schooling experience that continued to tell me that I didn't know, I had no experience, I had no history, I had nothing as a people, and that my education was complete without understanding who I was within it. And I think that whole piece for me, that being constantly in that disequilibrium between this Black beauty and you don't matter or your history doesn't matter, always sent me to this place where I wanted to know why I was here in this body, in this place, in this time. And one of the things that happened, especially as I was in Ghana, but even before then, was this idea that I had to figure out how to reconcile what I thought was beauty that other people didn't think was beauty. What I thought was smart that other people didn't think was smart. What I thought had history, because I heard my dad talking about it, and other people in my school didn't think was history. And it just dawned on me, and I don't remember when, but it just dawned on me that if I believed in God, if there was a God and the God was a righteous God, and my God has always been a righteous God, then in fact, there had to be a reason why he, she, they sent me here like this.
like this.
Mm-hmm. Like it had to have a purpose. And And so I sought from the time, I can remember very clearly from the time I was in high school, but certainly after that, I sought to figure out what that purpose was. Like, why am I here as a Black woman?
Yeah.
Why am I here? And that has been the most central question in my entire life. Why am I here as a Black woman? But I think it's a question that begs for other folks to think about that sort of existential reality too. Why am I here as a white person? Why am I here as a queer person? Why am I here as a Latinx folk? Why am I here as an immigrant? All of those, we've got to somehow reconcile that. And the only way you can reconcile that is to believe that there is a purposeful reason for you to have incarnated in that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's it.
So there was another moment when I was reading, and it set me back. Now, I don't have your speaking voice. I'm going to read it.
Oh, please read. Oh, I love it when people.
In the Rochesterian voice. And it's on page 7. And this, what you say here, Dr. Dillard, I'll just read it. It sounds like a whisper, not because we are not yelling and protesting and singing songs of liberation and freedom. It sounds like a whisper because it is coming from the inside out. That for me was just the most profound thing, that it sounds like a whisper. This yelling that we're doing, this protesting that we're doing, it's a whisper because it is coming from the inside and that spirit. So just go ahead and lay that on out. Lay that on.
I'm going to try, but I have to. I loved listening to you read, by the way. But this idea that all of these things that we're seeing right now, Black women calling for a space, Black women calling for their life, literally, Black women choosing to make decisions about how they will spend time and energy, Black women choosing to rest, Black women choosing to renew, Black women creating business, Black women on the street, Black women imagining and creating life. I think that that is not, it's not while it comes out as an external manifestation, it is coming from an internal understanding, right, of one's own power. When I choose to go take that nap that you just talked about, I'm making a choice about my inner health, my wellness, that I'm choosing to prioritize that as a way towards this liberation and freedom, as a way towards whatever we see as Black creativity and Black beauty and Black joy. So, yeah, it sounds like a whisper because it's inside of us. It's already there. But we have to get still enough, quiet enough. We have to rest enough to be able to hear it. But it's not that it's not there. We've had guidance like that from the ancestors, from the Creator forever, and we still do. But we got to get quiet to hear it. Yeah.
But also quiet, but also that piece you talk about, the seduction, how seductive whiteness is.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly when we're talking about teacher education, particularly when we're talking about education as a whole, or educational reform, or all the ways we think about education in this country. It is the seductiveness that whiteness is right, that this is the way it must be done. And so to even get right, to understand our purpose, understand who we are, is trying to let that go. But understanding it is seductive. It is pulling you away from remembering who you are.
That's right. And the reward systems are all wrapped up in that, right?
Yes.
So the rewards of whiteness are something, especially in the cultural context of the US, are something that folks strive for. Like, I'm told that this is what I should do, and the rewards especially economic rewards, will come to me if I do these particular kinds of things, not knowing that sometimes you are selling more than what you think you are when you are attempting to be something that you're not. And, you know, and I'm not saying that there's a particular one way of being Black or a particular one way of being an African person, but I am saying that if you are not concerned about the larger community, if you are not concerned about the existence of others and their well-being, if you are not concerned about something larger than yourself, then that is a run after whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
Aikwe Armand, another book called KMT in the House of Life, talks about research, for example, and how prior to colonization and prior to incursions of white folks into the continent of Africa, Black folks knew how to do research. And we did research with the best. We discovered it. We created it. And then those of us who have turned in the US to the study of inquiry and do research as our work, those are the models that we have for research. We have Western models for research. But when you think about where research came from, why are we not using more African-centered models? Why are we not in community? Why are we not? And I do see some of this happening. But this idea that we've got models of research, we've got models of how to be, we've got models that, again, humanize everybody. Why would we want to follow after a model that really is about taking and exploitation versus sharing? And that's at its root, at its ontology. African people believe in the notion of sharing. We are sharers, not takers. Yes. And if we follow our own path, then it means that we have to be in line with that notion of sharing and existing because other folks are existing and existing well.
Yeah. So I want to shift gears for a second because I want to talk about the study abroad.
Oh, okay, sure.
Because, you know, there is going to Ghana and then there's going to Ghana with Dr. Dillard. Those things are different because before you go to Ghana, you are going to study. Right. And study is not just about reading the book. Study is about being in community with folk. Study is about embracing what is unknown and unseen and being willing and able to understand what you are feeling. Right. That's the study part. And so when you take folks over, you don't just say, hey, we're going to Ghana. You set up this entire experience before you ever get there, so you understand what's going on. Walk us through before you get on that plane, before you get on that Delta, before you get your shots, all that stuff. The experience that you want us to have and understand, I think is very important the way you set it up, so Black educators can really embrace and understand what the continent, what Ghana can give them.
I'll try to do it in sort of broad strokes because, as you say, it's a lot. But I'll try to do it in broad strokes. And maybe they show up best in the kinds of commitments that I have for that experience. So one, and you've mentioned this before too, there's going to Ghana, and then there's going with us. And I try to follow that kind of model that Joyce King laid out so beautifully about critical studying. Like, one has to know something about the place that they're going to engage with. And I think that's particularly true of folks who come from this side of the water, because we don't study Black people. we don't study Black people. We barely study Black people here, let alone somewhere else. So this idea that it is necessary, because none of us have enough knowledge about who Black people are to study us prior to getting to that place. I think, secondly, there has to be a commitment of the person leading the group. And I guess I'm speaking specifically to teachers here, whether you do study abroad or not, you have to be well enough to curate the group that you're trying to take. You've got to be well enough to be able to move people from one place to another place, and to know enough about that other place where you can curate and hold carefully the different kinds of knowings that people will have. So this idea of wellness and wholeness I talk about in the book, that you've got to do some work beforehand. You can't just have good curriculum. You've got to have a sort of deeper knowledge, a world sense, if you will. You've got to feel, hear, taste, study, all of those things. You got to be a person who can ask good questions. Like, part of what our work is as educators, in my mind, is that you've got to be able to ask that particular question that will move that student from point A to point B. And if, in order to ask that question, you've got to know enough to be able to ask the question. So part of what I think has to happen is that there's this curation of the experiences. So part of what I had to do in order to get ready to take folks to Ghana is to make sure that the texts, for example, the things that we were reading or the things that we were watching were written by people who are from that place. There also had to be bridge texts. There had to be texts that linked the experience that we understand and know now to the experience that we were about to have. So when you take a book like Maya Angelou's All God's Children Need Traveling Shoes, Maya Angelou was born in the United States. Maya Angelou has that experience. Maya Angelou is a Black woman. Maya Angelou took her body over to Ghana in the 50s and 60s and lived there for a number of years. So her bridge experience helps us understand what life might be like in both of those places, right? So I had to find texts like that. And I guess part of what I'm saying is that it was important for folks to know what they didn't know, and then to have the desire to do that research, to search again for the knowledge they didn't have about the continent. I remember I don't know if you were there, Tina, the first night of the study abroad class, but one of the first activities that I asked folks to do is to take a piece of paper and to write down everything that they know about the continent of Africa. Now, I realize we're going to Ghana, but I want you to write about the continent of Africa, knowing full well that you don't know much. So I usually sit, and we usually take about 2, 3, 4 minutes, and we write, and the lists are so pitifully short, with the exception of those occasional students who have been African studies students or African American studies or history students. But we don't know about the continent. So you can't go there to be amongst Black people and not know what you need to know. You need to know something. And so that's part of what we do. And then once we get on the ground, you are also not the teacher. The question at the core of the study abroad for us is the question that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. raised after he came back from Ghana, after they had become an independent Black country. And the question for the civil rights movement here in the United States that he wanted to know was, what does this small little country have to teach us? And that's the spirit that we go to Ghana with. You ain't going there to mission. Folks in Ghana were fine before you got there. You're not going there to teach. Folks in Ghana are incredible teachers. You're going there to be a student, a humble student of what you do not know. And so that's part of the sort of ethos. And I think if we could figure out how to do that more often in not just university classes, but in K through 12 classes as well, where we recognize that there's wisdom in Black people, whoever they are, 5 years old or 25 years old. And if you can center that wisdom, the chances that both that student and all the students around them will actually come to know in multiple ways is greater. So, yeah. You'll just have to study abroad with us, but now it's Seattle U.
So before you're going to read another section for us, but before you do that, I have a question for you, and I want everyone to know that for the Q&A, there's a little button that says ask a question. You can put your question in there, and then when we get to the Q&A portion, we'll be able to read your question. So if you do have a question, coming up, the Q&A, we will take time for those questions. But you say on page 84, which is another just profound idea, Black children will benefit from the kind of conjuring, the kind of deep reflection and lessons engaged by Black women teachers that draw on the strengths of our spirits and the length of Black life, the length of Black life. These are the lessons that give new meaning to spirit, to self, to work, that arises from the origins of Africa, and bring those lessons to a life of building in community. And what I love about this book, Dr. Dillard, is it gives language to what, as Black women, we know we do. And so we know, everybody said we do the work, we just do the work. You just do the work. And it becomes this abstract thing of the work. But you make, it plain what the work is in this book. And that's what I love about it. And that's why I would love for you to read, starting on page 79 of my book, to create a village that loves the spirit of Black children. So that's how the section begins. To create a village that loves the spirit of Black children. You're not even saying like love Black children, love our books, love just the spirit. You have to love the spirit of us first before you go ahead, Dr. Dillard. Go ahead, read. I'm sorry.
All right, Tina. And I know this is one of your favorite parts, so I'm gonna try and do it justice. All right, to create a village that loves the spirit of Black children. The meaning of community and spirituality and their relation to school was under constant and continuous revision while we were in Ghana. We could see how profound it was to fundamentally ground education in humanizing ways and place that at the center of teaching and learning and living for Ghanaian children. And the focus on children's inherent competence, the value of love and collective caretaking, and the natural centering of culturally relevant and sustained teaching was what awaited children in classrooms in Ghana. And their parents and their community were always present. It was all love in the village. The way that life in Ghana is structured around village and community was not new to us as Black American women. Many of us had grown up in tight families and extended family circles that were our own villages, particularly those who had grown up in rural settings in the US. But there was something about seeing the freedom of Black children and families in the context of the village community that was a sight to behold. I will try to paint a portrait of what school in a village community in Ghana looks like, using my own Cynthia B. Dillard International School as an example. It is truly a labor of love familiar to me and to the Black women teachers who have visited this school over the years through our study abroad program. Our school is located in the village of Mimpiasam, in the central region of Ghana, to the west of the historic town of Elmina. What you see when you enter the grounds of our school is the spirit of Black children who feel full of themselves, whose spirits have never been separated from the cultural ways of being for Black people. Children who can call generations of their ancestors while standing on the land of the birth of those ancestors and their own. Children who have language that connects and embodies the meanings they wish to convey to the ancestors and to others, that flows like water from them. Sometimes when I speak with my children in Mimpiasam in the only language I know well, and which they are learning in school along with French and written Fanti, I feel a strong combination of guilt and sorrow as I recognize the deep sense of loss of my heritage language, wherever it lives on the African continents. So learning English, it is additive in our school and does not and will not ever serve as a substitute for children's home language. From the body of the Akan languages in Ghana, Fanti rings out boldly in classrooms at our school, in songs, in dances, in games, and in the ways that teachers check for meaning and understanding of the foreign languages of English and French in the daily lessons. That language from home is also present as the school connects and affirms the spiritual lives of the children, their teachers, and their community. Fanti is embodied with everyone's spiritual understanding of the world, God, whether in the form of Allah, Nyame, or a Christian God comes right up into the school with them and is celebrated as part and parcel of everything that they are. The children learn to understand science in relation to the ancestors in the universe, an echo of the lessons they learned from their farming grandparents and their teachers. They pray for strength and wisdom as they begin and end their days in multiple ways and to multiple versions of deity or divine energy without confusion or strife. They remember the moral lessons of the proverbs that undergird the Ghanaian symbolic language of Adinkra that has been a foundational part of Ghanaian literacy practices and discourse for millennia. They celebrate through indigenous and contemporary foods, songs, dance, music, and forms of speaking. As a visitor to our school, quote, "You are invited," is what children will say to you and what every visitor says they feel. Whether through a child's hand that lovingly grabs yours to show you the way to their school and its practices, or in the invitation to eat right alongside them from the same bowl. I am because you are. I understand my world by understanding and inviting you and yours into mine. These children, like all children, will lead us. But what the Black women teachers talked about after having visited several schools in Ghana was the need for schools and teachers to be spiritually ready for Black children. To teach in ways that are worthy of them requires that their teachers examine their own inner lives, those places in their hearts where they may harbor mischaracterizations and misunderstandings of the spirit and power of Black children. This examination invariably raises fundamental questions as we unpacked and examined our spirits as teachers, revisioning how we might be more willing, able, and ready for the invitations that Black children are giving us every day in the U.S. We were humbled by a question that puzzled us as we went to school after school in Ghana, seeing joyous spaces of education where Black children and community were inextricably woven together. How might we create similar educational spaces relevant to the spirit of Black children and communities in the U.S.? Having grown up in the racially divided United States of America, I was certainly more ignorant than I should have been about the length and breadth of global Black life when I first started traveling to Ghana nearly 3 decades ago, and sometimes even today. Growing up in the U.S., I had been forcibly socialized and separated, sometimes by my own will, from African ways of knowing and being. As Black Americans, we often do not understand, see, or feel that Africa is part of us, and we are a part of her. Like everyone in our group, I too learned in school that my people began in slavery on the U.S. side of the waters. But what physically being in Ghana let us know is a profound truth. As enslaved persons in the New World is not where we began. Our story as Black women had an origin, a root, and a route. What the children in the school in Mimpiasam taught us, and Ghanaian knowledges and culture continues to teach us more broadly, is that African American children and people on the continent can still mostly see Black Americans as African people. Yes, we are seen differently, sometimes even problematically, given the ways that global capitalism has positioned us one to another. But in time spent together, we experienced something much more relational and more loving, the company of our brothers and sisters. Let us be reminded, 400 plus years and scores of oppressions on both sides of the water is a lot to unlearn and a long context within which to remember beyond the lies we have been told and that we have learned. But the bottom line is that African or Black Americans are still part of a Pan-African community, unbounded by temporal or physical limits. Africans belong to the African community, even when not residing in a predominantly African town or community. In the ways we were invited in and took up our invitations as Black women teachers, we belonged to Mimpiasam. We could see ourselves as Black women teachers in the spirit of the village of Mimpiasam, in this home place that Ghana had become for us.
I'm sure everyone at home can understand why that is one of my favorite sections of the book.
It's one of mine too, Tina. It's one of mine too.
The way you talk about the spirituality And there's no conflict in the gods. There's no conflict with having, and that's what I saw in Ghana. There was this freedom. We're not choosing. We're all of this.
And then some.
And then some. And for children to know that. And it's basically saying, catch up. Catch up. Catch up. This is what the kids catch up. And to try to think about how that experience could be here and the possibilities that it could be here. And the work that you say we have to do, inner work, to get it here. And I think that's the piece that we miss, is the inner work. That's the piece that we want to rush, and we want to talk about how we got to change schools, how we got to change this. You're not right.
And I think that's particularly true after this, as we live through a global pandemic, without the creative and imaginative ability to think ourselves out of some of the problems we're seeing in schools right now. It has been incredible to watch our response to schooling in this country, given the global pandemic, and the ways that contrasts so greatly with what was happening in Ghana at the same time, even amidst the pandemic. The ways that teachers had the ability to shift everything that they did in order to be able to be outside, to be able to be in small groups, to be able to be in community, to be able to work together in a way that teachers are bound in the U.S. Not able to do that kind of work. So yeah, there's something that our inability to have done that inner work prior to taking up the vocation of teaching is problematic. And so I've been thinking a lot, Tina, about this idea of what teacher education needs to look like. Mm-hmm. And it feels like to me that it needs to start with this overwhelming kind of work that is really about unlearning and relearning. It's really about sort of taking apart the things that we thought we knew, and then lifting up the things that we come to know, especially if we're trying to think about racial reconciliation or understanding one another across these differences. There's no way to do that if you don't know who the hell you are. Mm-hmm. So that's where we start. Goldie Muhammad and I had the same conversation, and we were laughing about how if it were up to us, maybe there would be a year of this inner work that we would do. And then there would be a year of the historical work that would have to be done in order to learn what we need to learn in order to be able to teach well. And then we would come behind with the curricular work. Because
the curricular work being last.
That's last.
But you just said
at the end of the day. Go ahead.
You and Goldie Muhammad creating something. I'm like, ho. That's like just the levels of that. I mean, but you're right. The curriculum being last. How you gonna build a curriculum when you don't know us?
Yeah.
How you gonna build a curriculum when you don't know yourself? Yeah. You up here doing lesson plans. The lesson is you.
Yep.
I mean, that just, so, I mean, as we close, Dr. Dillard, thinking about the time you spent in Ghana and taking folks over and with Black educators in this beautiful book about Black women educators, what are the things that we can learn from Black women educators that can help all teachers, that can help the field? And I know it's a lot, but I'll preface this. I was teaching a class a few weeks ago, and we were watching Black Joy, this conversation around Black Joy.
Sure.
And in the University of Georgia, many, students, white students. And after it was over, I asked my students, what do you think about that? Oh, that was amazing. That was beautiful. I can't believe how amazing Black people are. Oh, okay. All right, good. And I asked her, I said, well, how are you going to do this in your body? authentically in your body. How are you going to create what Black folks have created in your body? It's possible. Now, you can't do it like us.
Yeah.
But you have to believe that you can do this too, that you can heal, that you can find joy, that you can love, that you can inspire. You have to believe that you can do it too, because if not, white teachers make up almost 80% of the teaching force. So when you see us, don't just marvel at us. Understand that, pick it up. So
but I think you've said a couple things there though, Tina. Part of it is that Tony Cade told us this a long time ago. There's a lot of weight when you are well, right? You sure you want to be well, and I'm not totally convinced that everybody wants to be well, because being well also means that you might have to give up some of these things that you have held on to so tightly, some of the privilege that you've always had. But it does feel to me that young white teachers will have to craft their way of figuring out how to hold Black life. I can't do it for you. I can show you the way I do it, but you will have to figure out how you do it. But I think to your first question, what do Black women offer up as lessons for everybody? I think, and this is what I talk about it's a love letter. The last chapter is a love letter to Black women, to everybody, but it's a love letter to teachers about what Black women offer up. I think one thing we offer you is the invitation. It's always the case when white students travel with me to Ghana, and we have a number of white students who travel with us to Ghana. It is always the idea that they want to go because they know there are some things they don't know, and they want to know. But what they end up finding out is that they've been invited to church. You, in the company of Black people, you are invited to church. And part of what I think Black women do for others is that we are the invitation. What we know, what we do, how we do it is the invitation. Now, like you said, you cannot do it like us, but we invite you to figure out how to do it for you. So that invitation, I think, is critical. And that was one of the things that was so profound for our students, all students on the continent of Africa. Nowhere in Ghana were you not invited to be a part of everything that was there. Whether it was dancing, whether it was a meal, whether it was whatever, you were always invited. Even before they ate a meal, folks were like, you're invited. And the expectation was that you could come and sit on down and have some food. So we provide examples through the invitation. And I think the other thing that Black women offer up in abundance is this idea of sanctuary. If you watch Black women teachers, they're like that mother hen that will gather everybody up under those feathers. We are a sanctuary and have been a sanctuary for so many. And I think the examples of sanctuary, whether in the hush harbors, whether in our work in enslaved spaces, our work as teachers now, we are always that place where all kinds of kids find their way to us because of the kinds of ways that we know how to care and nurture and see humans as humans. So those two things I know for sure, that Black women provide this incredible example of an invitation, and we provide an incredible example of what it means to actually care for young people and old people, frankly. Yeah, those two things for sure.
We will now turn to the Q&A part of this event, but I hope you all have enjoyed this. I hope you all have just learned as much as I have learned, and I hope you will have pre-ordered your book. I'm gonna say that I'm just that little green. Go ahead and get your pre-order on. But it's just, Dr. Dillard, this is it's just, I mean, even the cover, and this is one of your students.
Yeah, it is.
Even the cover, right? It's just,
and you know that cover. I mean, just to give you a little backstory. See, you all are going to get the tea about about the cover. So when the book was finished and we were looking at covers, I got a lot of covers that were designed that looked like the sort of front of a self-help book. And I didn't want the book to look like a self-help book because it's not a self-help book. It's deeper than that. I wanted it to capture the spirit of our work. This student happens to be standing at the banks of the Slave River at Asin Manso. It was in Ghana, in the central region of Ghana. It's known because it was the first place where enslaved Africans who had been brought from as far north as Mali and other places was the first place they were allowed to take a bath, to have water hit their bodies. It was also a major slave market within the continent and definitely within Ghana. And it was also the last place where enslaved African people could feel water on their bodies, take a bath in the river before they walked that last 60 miles to the slave dungeons on the coast. For me, the idea of having a cover that really embodies the work that Black women do, that really embodies the ways that we are constantly in this remembering state, if we're open to it, to create a life that is better and in honor to folks who did that long walk, who managed to stay in those dungeons, who managed to stay alive across that transatlantic slave trade, and then managed to, do a few more 100 years on plantations in the United States. That cover needed to cover all of that for me. And so I love Beacon Press. Can I just say that? But I love this cover in particular because it is a monument, if you will, to the fact that I know the ancestors thought of us as they were going through what they were going through. And if we are going to be their wildest dreams, we've got to somehow remember them. And that for me is like, if you didn't even have a word in the book, the cover itself is a reminder that to be a wildest dream meant that somebody thought about you before you were here. And that we have to honor that long walk, that long journey, legacy.
All right, you have a question in the chat?
Question in chat.
The Academy has discouraged the bringing of the whole self into the Academy. The result is that graduate students and sometimes spend years trying to connect back to spirituality. What would you say to the folks who are learning to remember that they are spirit, soul, and body?
I say to them,
what would you say to folks who are learning to remember that they are spirit, soul, and body?
First, I would say, well done. I mean, so welcome home. The second thing I would say is that this will not necessarily be an easy journey. I think sometimes when we think about spirituality, because many of us were raised in religious settings, there's this idea that I can just pray and then it will happen. The kind of work that I'm talking about is the kind of work that really listens to those whispers and actually does something as a result of them. So in the book, I talk about these processes of remembering, this idea of researching. Like, you've got to look again. You can't just look at the same stuff and expect that something different's going to happen. That's the definition of crazy. So you've got to research, you got to look again at something, look for something in a deeper way. You've got to then think about how you can envision something new, revision what you already know. You have to then see that that mind is getting right, that you are actually recognizing that you are something other than what you've been told. And then this notion that you will then represent that knowing in a different kind of way, that you will show up differently. And then finally, that you will actually claim a legacy that is different than the one that you were walking in before.
Yeah.
You will claim the legacy of that cover.
Yeah.
And so I guess I would say to graduate students, what I would love to see for you is some congruence between what you are studying, who you are, and the methods that you're using.
Mm.
And the ways you're representing text. I think that you can stand in the histories and herstories of Black people when you know them. So the first job is to get to know them, and then to actually change your behavior, your ways of being in line with those precepts. You've got to. So, but I would first say welcome. You got a long road to hoe. But getting congruent, having that integrity between your walk and your talk is where you're trying to get.
So I think we have one final question from an amazing doc student at the University of Georgia, and we have some amazing doc students right now,
Yes,
Black women doc students. First of all, was so busy listening, can barely craft a question, but nonetheless, I ain't gonna hold you. Can you take more time? Can you talk more about what you're envisioning as you move beyond UGA and into this deanship?
Wow. Somebody took me there.
It's a beautiful question. Yeah, that was Jaminique Adams. I ain't gonna hold you, Adams.
Yeah, I ain't gonna hold you, but
I ain't gonna hold you, Adams.
What do I envision? Okay, so what some people may not know about me is that I've served throughout my academic career as an academic leader from the time I started, from the time I was an assistant professor, as associate deans and as department chairs and other kinds of roles. And I've always wondered whether I could work this magic in an entire college. So this is my opportunity. This is my sort of swan song. It's sort of like I've already started a school. I know the stuff that I know works. And now I want to see if I can make it work in a college. If I can have the kind of teacher education, at least influence the kind of teacher education in the direction of looking at the spirit of our work. If I can create the kinds of pipelines that I know need to be, where we can stop saying 80% of our students are white students who are in teacher education. That's not a default position that we can live with. We have got to address the fact that 80% of our students are white students. Now, white students should be a part of that pipeline, but they shouldn't be the entire pipeline. And so part of the work is to diversify that pipeline. So we're working already. Jesus, I have a meeting tomorrow with the Gates Foundation. We're working on putting together funding for addressing the pipeline of teacher education all along the way through teacher education. So doctoral kinds of programs to support new faculty members as well. Because one of the things we know is if you've got Black folks and brown folks as teachers, then you're more likely to have brown folks as new PhDs, and you're more likely to have brown folks in master's programs, and you're more likely to have brown folks in teacher education, teaching classes as well. So this is a grand experiment. I have the skill set to do the work that I think I want to do. Seattle University has the disposition as an innovative Jesuit progressive university. And we have a new president who holds so many of these things, a Latinx law professor, former law dean, who is stunning in his visioning. And I am incredibly excited to work with him. So I think we're about to make some things happen in Seattle. stay tuned. But so much of it is rests around this idea of diversifying teacher education and counselor education and ed administration and nonprofit work in the Seattle and Northwest area. So yeah, I have had an amazing run at the University of Georgia. It has been a blessing to carry the name of Mary Frances Early as the first Black woman who graduated from the University of Georgia. It has been an honor and a privilege to hold that seat. But it's now time for someone else to do that work. And it's time for me to step up to the plate that not enough of us have the credentials to be able to do. So that's another piece. Black Women's Leadership Academy, here we come. The bench is very short for Black women and brown women and Asian women. So we'll have a leadership academy for women of color to try to make sure that the next dean, the next associate dean, the next department chair can be women of color. So there's lots of ideas. And I get to work with the most amazing executive coordinator who was our Carolyn Burroughs at University of Georgia. She's now in Seattle. I had a chance to see her last week. And Carolyn's just running stuff already.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. So I am grateful for the run at Georgia, but I'm also really excited about this run at Seattle U. To be the person who gets to answer the question, gets to sign the papers, gets to have those meetings with big donors. Yeah, and for them to have those meetings with me. Yeah. So I'm not a typical dean. I am the first Black dean on the Seattle University campus, and certainly the first Black woman dean. And so this is also a beautiful opportunity for folks in Seattle to interact with someone who is like me and who brings all of that with us. We have a huge event planned in May with Elliott Bay Bookstore in Seattle, one of my favorite bookstores too. And so it's the coming out party for the Microsofts and the Amazons. And see, you have to remember where Seattle is, you know, it's the tech sort of hub place. Boeing and Microsoft and Amazon, they're all there. And they need to be funding education.
That's right.
And so those conversations have already begun with the presidents and the provosts and the deans. So I'm excited. But I'll miss some of y'all.
Well, we have been fortunate enough at the University of Georgia, Dr. Dillard, to learn from you, to love on you, to listen to you, and it's been amazing. I will cherish every moment. If I could just tell a quick story about who Dr. Dillard is really quickly to everybody. When I first got to UGA, we just so happened to have our schedules were the same on Tuesdays. And Dr. Dillard for an entire year made me lunch. And every Tuesday we had lunch. We sat there, and Dr. Dillard can cook, number one. Dr. Dillard can bake, number two. And Dr. Dillard is formal. But you got to know about Dr. Dillard is a formal person. So she would have her basket, real plates, salad, water. She would have utensils, and we would eat, and we would laugh, and we would talk. And it was the first year that I was at the University of Georgia. And I will never forget that, Dr. Dillard. That was such an amazing experience to sit at your feet every Tuesday and listen and learn and love and laugh. And it created a sisterhood, a family, a love that I will always cherish at the University of Georgia. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Don't just get the book, get another one for your cousin, get another one for your niece, get another one for your future teachers, get another one just to have. Get one just because you want the cover to frame it. Just get a couple, 2, 3. Just get a couple, 2, 3. That's all we ask. And any closing words, Dr. Dillard, before we hand it over to ER?
No, I appreciate folks being here tonight. And also too, just so you know, we're reading from the advanced reader copies because it's not in our hands yet. But the book is actually a hardcover. So it's really beautiful. I saw my first one the other day, and it's just gorgeous. So just know that you're not going to have a paperback like we have. You'll have a real live hardback, whatever. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the work that you do. Keep remembering, y'all, it's the only way forward, honestly. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Dr.
Love you.
Jinx.
Thank you both so much for this beautiful evening. For folks who want to buy the book from Charis, it does really help us when you purchase event books directly from us. You can do so by clicking that teal button at the bottom center of your screen, just right down there. Takes you one click. You can also buy Dr. Love's books from Charis. We do want to remind you that the Spirit of Our Work comes out in mid-November, so it will ship as soon as it hits our shelves. We'll turn around and ship it to you. But don't be upset. Know that I know folks are anxious to get it, but we made the choice to do this as a pre-order event because it was already scheduled, and the supply chain stuff pushed us a little bit because we were anxious to just go ahead and celebrate this book, but just got to wait about 2 weeks, and it'll be on its way to you. We do think it makes a great holiday gift, so please think about, the teachers in your life, beyond just, friends and family, but also educators who are helping your children or the children of others right now, because it is such a special book. So, Dr. Dillard, thank you so much for allowing us to help launch this book. It is truly our pleasure. And always, Dr. Love, we enjoy everything that we get to do with you. So I hope that you both stay safe and well. And to all of you out there watching, thank you as well to the Auburn Avenue Research Library for offering so many wonderful resources in the chat. Go back up and look at those and check those out. I'll be adding captions to this and putting it up on our YouTube, and you can share that link as well as this link. Folks can rewatch this as many times as they like and revisit the resources in the chat. So take care, be well, and thank you again.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.